What's up, guys? I just want to make this quick sponsor video for your Spar Soap. Spar Soap is our sponsor for this video, so much appreciated to you guys. As always, check them out in the links down below. Here is their ad. Thank you, Spar Soap, for sponsoring this video. Much appreciated to you guys. As always, much love. And as always, links in the description box down below. Yes, Bar Soap is an organic soap company made locally here in California, and obviously, which is obviously part of the U.S. Yeah, been using Bar Soap for a long time now. They've been sponsoring my not only this channel but my other two YouTube channels. Again, links in the description box down below. But yeah, we'll go ahead, check them out. If you're in the athletics department, meaning you do martial arts, you box, you lift weights, like you don't know what you're touching. So this is a good way to make sure you don't get any ringworm or any other issues that may come with rolling on a mat at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practice, or stepping on a wrong patch or whatever you want to call it in your karate dojo or somewhere else. But as always, much love to you guys. As always, check them out. It helps the show. But yeah, check them out. Much love to you guys. And here is your regular scheduled video for your podcast. Hey guys, welcome to our 12th episode of our podcast. I am the Rhino. The bat is actually in San Francisco dealing with some stuff. Today we got a guest on the show. We have Dr. Satish Subramaniam. Dr. Satish is a board-certified occupational medicine physician. He has a special interest in occupational exposures and occupational problems. He also partners with patients to meet their needs for various occupational illnesses, injuries, and exposures. His goal is to provide a comprehensive care with management and advocacy to get them healthy and back to work in a working order. Dr. Satish, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Great to be on.
So for those of you who are listening or paying attention or watching the video here on YouTube, we are obviously in a pandemic, and since Satish Subramaniam is obviously a doctor, I thought it would be a good time to talk about his opinion on the pandemic here in the U.S. So let's start off with the first question. How'd you end up in medicine?
How did I end up in medicine? Good golly, Miss Molly. That, takes me back in numerous years that I don't want to go back to. Just kidding. I was born into a family of physicians. My grandfather was the first physician in my hometown in India. And then my father followed suit. So, somewhere down the line, I think it got ingrained in me to be a physician. And the ideal of service kind of kept cropping up. So slowly but surely, I gravitated towards it, and here we are.
Cool. So since you've been in the medical field for quite some time now, how has your job changed because of the pandemic?
I think, first of all, let's just talk a little bit about the pandemic. As you know,
Okay.
The coronavirus is being talked about everywhere. I'm hoping that people are getting their information from reputable sources. I'm hoping they're not, getting their information from non-reputable sources. So like the health authority or somebody like that would be most appropriate. The key thing is that this is a new virus, which has jumped species to human beings. And that's the reason why we're seeing this amount of an issue in terms of, controlling it, because we have no native immunity to it. So therefore, the big issue in terms of, exposure and limiting exposure and trying to, look at different ways of doing it, like social distancing, wearing a mask, etc. So what we know is that this is, primarily a respiratory droplet type spread of infection. So I think that's the big concern here in terms of making sure that people are taking precautions, making sure that they are following guidelines and trying to stay safe, even though there's difficulties with doing that in certain circumstances, but at least taking precautions so they're staying healthy and not having a problem. Okay, so that's bottom line. So
Right.
the key issue is that, as you know, this virus spreads very easily by droplet. And therefore, there's been a quarantine or a semi-quarantine or different phases of quarantine, if you want to call it, in place in many states throughout the US and many countries around the world. The problem is that when you have a quarantine type situation, it creates two problems. Number one, on the doctor's side, how do I get to work? Am I going to be able to go to work? Am I going to be able to function, in the midst of this pandemic in the normal way that I can? The other side of it is the patients, they are worried, can I really go to my doctor's office? Can I get there? If I get there, am I going to get this virus? I don't know what's going on. So there's a lot of confusion in terms of how all of this evolved initially. So I think that, in our area, we were very savvy to what was going on. And we actually were the first to introduce or, put into place precautions at all of our clinics and medical facilities in terms of screening with a questionnaire for this illness, trying to make sure that people are aware of what they need to be looking for, checking people's temperatures, outside the door of the office, triaging them even before they're allowed inside the building. So, a lot of things changed in a big hurry in terms of normal practice. Normal practice would be, hey, welcome, come on in, hang out in the reception area. Let's, talk to you, figure out what you're here for, and then get you in the room to talk with a doctor. Now it's not that. It's basically, we stop you at the door, we screen you, we kind of say, look, if you have a fever or if you have any other issue, if you're having a cough, if you have other things, we can't see you today. So, it is definitely a huge change for patients when they hear that. So basically, we feel bad that we're telling them not to come in the office, and they feel bad that they're being turned away because they got an urgent medical issue. Now they have to go to a different facility to get screened and then potentially be triaged out to come to my office where I can do what, they need specifically to have happen. So the pandemic has changed the patient's perspective in two ways. Number one, they are scared. They don't know whether they can go to their doctor's office. They are worried that if they go to their doctor's office, they don't know how much of exposure is going to be there because they don't know what's going on in the doctor's office. We hope that everybody's screening, but we don't know that. So naturally, they're very skittish about coming in or trying to explore other options in terms of not going into the doctor, but trying other things before they get there, right? So people are putting off stuff. People are putting off treatment. People are putting off things, until they become a little more difficult to handle. And then they're, making the effort to go to the doctor, right?
Okay.
So that's one side of it. The other side of it is the physician side where, we are scared about people coming in the facility. If people come in and they're spreading COVID, now all the employees are going to get sick. And if all the employees get sick, how are we going to see patients, right?
Right.
So it cuts both ways. So I think that what has happened is that there's been a pretty significant awakening in terms of personal hygiene, making sure that the antisepsis or the, antibacterial atmosphere is maintained in the clinics and on the person, and making sure that we're taking adequate precautions so that we don't ourselves get sick, right?
Right.
So I think that, it has definitely made a big impact in terms of how we see patients in the office and how exactly we go about our business, because we can't just have everybody walk in the door. So now our volumes are shot to hell and beyond. We're hardly seeing 5-10 people a day when we're seeing 30 and 40 people. So it has definitely made things a lot more difficult. It made things, a lot more onerous, if you want to call it that, we're not able to see folks the same way that we did before.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we're having to do is this. So I think at this point, what we're doing is making sure that people are safe, right? So we're taking care of ourselves in the best way possible by using, the hand hygiene and, personal hygiene, as well as, decontamination of rooms after patients, and making sure that patients are taken care of by making sure that they are wearing a mask and they are, their temperatures are being checked and they're being screened at the door, so that we can all, be in a happy environment where we don't need to worry about each other. Right. So that's, that's one side of it. So that's just the patient to physician interaction that's changed. Right. Now we're wearing a mask. Right. So we can't see facial expression. Right. So, before, you wear a mask, people think you're going to rob a bank. Now you wear a mask, people think it's a fashion statement. They wanted to match their shirt, their, dress, whatever, so it's kind of gone from one end to the other. So when you wear a mask, what are we looking at? I can't tell your facial expression. Are you smiling under the mask? Are you, screaming under the mask? Are you like, cursing me under the mask? I don't know what's going on. Right. So sometimes, when we have to assess, some of these conditions or some of these complaints, we're looking for expression, right? We're looking for facial expression. We're looking to see if they elicit pain or discomfort, whatever, right? Now it's only eyes that you can see. So, it has become a little bit more difficult trying to elicit some of these things. And, it's definitely, people are needing to speak up more and, talk a lot more than they normally would, and we are not able to pick up on these nonverbal cues as much as we used to before. So it's definitely changed the interaction between the patient and the physician, right? Okay. And then the other side of it is, there are only certain things that, we want to be taken on. We don't want to be taking on a whole lot of things that we feel are, probably problematic in this, situation. For example, there are certain tests that we probably should not be doing, and we're not. So, for example, a breathing test, what's called a spirometry, right? So we have held off because anything that generates, droplets, where people have to blow into a tube or do something like that, we don't want to do them because there's concern for spreading the virus, right, within the office. So, for example, a breath alcohol is a simple example, right? A breath alcohol test, somebody is, acting weird on the job. The employer says, hey, just go get breath alcohol test and come back because I don't know what's going on with you, right? You seem a little awkward today. So, the person is brought in, we can't really do that. Now we're going to have to take this person outside and have them blow out into the air in the back of the office so that we don't get any infection spreading within the office, right?
And possibly everywhere else too.
Exactly. So it has become very difficult in terms of some of these things that we have to do, some of these precautions we have to take, but we're making the best of it. I mean, that's what you can do. I mean, we're in the business of taking care of people. So we're doing the best we can. And, there are times when, it is difficult for both patient and physician, but hey, it's all about talking it out with each other and coming to a happy medium and making it happen. Right.
Cool. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's one, that's the patient physician interaction in the office type stuff. Now, what has it done on the other side of it, to the administrative side of it, meaning, how we deliver healthcare, think about it. After the pandemic hit, we didn't want patients coming into our offices for routine stuff, right? If you're sick, you got an issue, call us. We'll try to triage you. We'll try to get you in and we'll try to get it done. Right.
Right.
So all those normal things like normal physicals, your blood tests, all of that stuff, everything has been put on hold. Now we're not doing a whole lot of that stuff. So what has happened to our volumes? Our volumes have dropped dramatically, right? A lot of us physicians have nothing to do. We're sitting in our office twiddling our thumbs because we have hardly few patients to see. So then we decided, okay, well, let's do telehealth, right? We can do it over a video. We can try. We can at least, figure out something. It's already in there. This medium is there. So we have had to, learn in a hurry about how to do telemedicine, make sure that we are, what's called the HIPAA compliant. We have to be careful about patient data, right?
Right.
Then make sure that, privacy is maintained. And then we've had to learn on the go, we're just flying by the seat of our pants, learning all these things, trying to incorporate it and trying to go, right? Provide care for patients. So we've had to do a lot of stuff administratively to kind of figure this out and try to deliver the care that we can without kind of having a big problem in terms of, how we do things, and the fact that, we can't really, see the same volumes that we used to before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest impact, I think, more than physicians, is dentists. They've had the bigger impact because they've not been able to see anybody face to face for the longest time in many places. You can imagine, if I don't go to work today, nobody's paying me, right? Nobody's putting food on the table. I got to go into work for it to happen. So that's what's happening everywhere. I think not necessarily non-medical, the non-medical workforce is struggling. I mean, tremendously, but at the same time, I think the medical and the allied fields are also struggling in the sense that, we've had to put people on furlough. When you have only a few patients showing up, what is the need for, 5 doctors in the office? Can we go down to 2 to manage the volume? So there's a lot of trickle down, downstream effects that have come into play that are pretty significant. But thankfully, in many states, I think we're limping back to our pre-pandemic levels. So we've had to slowly incorporate the telehealth visits. There have been a lot of changes in the law pertaining to some of these things so that, privacy can be maintained and we can still do these things within the purview of the privacy mandate from the government. So I think that we have definitely evolved and made it a lot more cohesive in terms of trying to take care of people in whichever way they feel comfortable. They don't feel coming into the office is conducive for them, or they're afraid, then hey, can we do a telehealth visit? At least we can do something, right? Something is better than nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's definitely changed our outlook in terms of how we, how we practice medicine. The hands-on kind of approach has been challenged, and we're trying to find innovative ways of doing, or providing the care, the best way we can when the hands-on approach is not possible, right? So it's definitely changed our perspective. And I think that, I think it is a good thing in some ways, of course, not a good thing in other ways, but, we have to make the best of the situation. And I think that that's where all of the changes are.
Right. All right. That makes sense. So moving forward, well, let me not ask that question. When do you think the pandemic will be over? Do you think, like, Dr. Fauci is thinking like 2021, 2022? People say sooner, other people say later. What's your thoughts?
Right. So I think that, expert opinion, basically is, the jury is out on that one. The problem is this. The problem is that we do not know how many people have had the virus already, how many people are immune, how many people are not immune, what kind of issues we have in terms of the population. We don't have much of data on it, right? Because we have not done a whole lot of testing.
Right.
Some places we have geared up and done a lot more testing, but then again, we are far away from, knowing for sure, like Taiwan or Korea, where they tested everybody possible in terms of whether you have some kind of immunity, or you've had the illness, or you've not had the illness. Where exactly are we in that sense? We don't quite know. So therefore, it's hard to predict, how quickly this will die out. The hope is that, with the surge of infections that we're seeing, that, there's some amount of, herd immunity that comes as part of it. Excuse me. That's the only little silver lining that I can see with all these cases going up and going nuts. Right. So I think that hopefully there's some more exposure and people will kind of get a little more immune to it. I don't know. I think that for all practical purposes, we may continue to have coronavirus. It may become like the flu and stay in the background without causing a whole lot of grief once we have good immunity to it. But then until that time, I think the jury is out in terms of how, this will go. The bigger fear is once the flu season starts, we don't know how this is going to behave. And it's going to throw everything into turmoil because we don't know what we're facing when somebody comes in with flu-like illness. Is it COVID? Is it flu? Is it something else? I mean, that's where I think the bigger issue is going to be, unfortunately.
Right.
So hopefully by next spring, summer, I think we'll be in a little better position than we are now to kind of say with certainty, how this is all going to play out.
Right. So you're saying like within the next couple of years, everything should go back to relative normality.
Well, I'm hoping within a year, I think we should have a pretty good idea. Once this winter passes, I think we'll have much more information, tangible information that we can use to kind of at least make, some predictions in terms of how this will all kind of turn out.
Okay. So let's fast forward a little bit to, let's say 2022 now, August 22nd. And let's just say the pandemic is over by then. Let's just pretend for right now. What do you think, like, if let's just say another pandemic hits in 10 years, what can we use from this pandemic to make sure this doesn't happen again or limit this from happening again in the future?
So repeat that question. I think I lost the early part of it because it was a little bit of a connection issue.
Oh, sorry. I said, let's fast forward to 2022, 2 years from now, on August 22nd. Let's pretend the pandemic is 100% over worldwide. What will change between August 22nd, 2020, and let's just say another pandemic 10 years from now, August 22nd, 2030?
Okay.
What can we learn? All that stuff.
That's right. I think that, so this has been something that the public health experts have been warning for a long time, but I think they were kind of ignored, or they were not quite, taken seriously, I think. So I think what we can learn from this pandemic is this. Number one, we were ill prepared to meet the demands of what this would entail. Number two, we realized where all the supply chain issues were, from testing to PPE to everything in between. Number three, we were, not very clear about how to provide care to people in terms of, COVID and non-COVID illness. And we were kind of concerned about, how to go about doing all these things. So I think that, as we have gone through and, moved with the pandemic, we've understood a few things very well in terms of what works and what doesn't work. I think that for all practical purposes, I think we need to start with good public health funding. We need to have a good system in place to make sure that, there is public health resources that can be marshaled when a pandemic like this hits. Meaning, we need to be able to get to the source, isolate them, do contact tracing, do testing, make sure that we have viable options outside the medical environment that we can put into place to tackle something like this quickly. And that kind of takes the onus off of the medical system, which usually gets drowned taking care of some of these things, right? So I think that, that is potentially one area of focus that people are looking at. I think we've learned a lot. I think that's something that is being, worked on. The other thing that I think is going to come into view is, how do we, provide health care for people, even, it doesn't need to be for the next pandemic, but, between now and then, how is healthcare delivery going to change as part of this evolving dynamic of how to, get around, some of these hangups when there's a pandemic or there's a lockdown and, people can't travel and people can't go anywhere, right? So can we take the care to the person, right? Telehealth is one way of doing it. Can we send a public health nurse or a nurse, that can go in and screen and, get things done? I think that that's the other focus that we're seeing in terms of trying to get the care delivery model changed a little bit, right? So again, I think that, we are definitely seeing, a lot of, I think, the old paradigms being questioned or being called into question in terms of how we deliver care and how it can be changed in terms of, meeting the needs for something like this that comes around once every so often, but it just decimates all of the things that we can do or we cannot do, and, creates, a whole lot of problems in terms of exposing some of the issues around, handling such a big health crisis.
Okay. So
That makes sense?
that makes total sense to me. I mean, like, if you look at like the most recent pandemic prior to COVID was, I think, the Spanish flu back in the early 1900s in the U.S. And I mean, you can kind of take some similarities between then and now, and people were like still going to like baseball games and like with the masks and like social distancing. But at the same time, like people still got sick and like so I'm just kind of like, why are people so stupid like half the time?
That's right. So I think,
Yeah.
so I think, a lot of those things are important to kind of continue. I think, in my view, I think if testing were available large scale and we're able to put into focus quickly, for example, an employer wants to bring his employees back to work. How does he or she decide how these employees can come back to work? You have social distancing within the work environment. You have all the, antibacterial, procedures in place to kind of help the process. We have ventilation systems and everything being taken care of to prevent spread of the virus. So what else can we do? We need to test people, right? So you test people, they don't have it, they can go into work, right? You can definitely make sure that people can be safe around these people, and you test them as often as you need to, right? Or you test for immunity and say, okay, well, you seem to have some immunity to this, but we don't know how long it's going to last. But then your acute infection test is also negative, so let's move on. Let's move you in, keep you working, right? As long as you're taking the precautions, wearing the mask, and doing what you need to do, hey, we can easily bring people back to work and try to get a lot of the industries back up again, following some good sound medical guidelines and principles. If we are able to test for all of this, I think that those areas where infection rates are low, we can easily slowly start bringing people back to work and trying to get everything kind of back on track with the economy, if we can definitely test and get things moving.
Right. So, I mean, like, obviously there are a lot of people in the U.S., I'm not going to speak for anyone else outside the country, that are saying, oh, because Trump isn't wearing a mask, why should I? Or God doesn't want, or Jesus doesn't want me to wear a mask because of something, whatever X, Y, Z reason. How would you, like, convince some of those people to wear a mask or do something else to protect themselves and others?
So I think, unfortunately, I mean, making it compulsory always creates, problems in people's minds. I think, you need to put out the evidence, show what it does, show what it doesn't do, and let people make the decisions for themselves. I think that people are adult enough to know what they need to do and what their social and, professional obligations are. They know what to do. I think that, sometimes this becomes a politically charged issue, and that's why, it kind of takes on a different tangent, Even in my office, when people come in and they have an issue wearing a mask, we say, okay, so what is the problem? Why do you want to wear a mask? I mean, it is only to protect everybody around you, and you is why we're asking you to do this. So how can we help you to, wear this and get your care, right? So is there an alternative that we could use? Okay, can you use a face shield? All right, let's use a face shield and get you in. So what is the crux issue behind not wearing the mask, right? So I think if we get down to the bottom of it, at least we can help the person kind of, get to where they need to go.
Okay, that makes sense. So kind of finding the midpoint or a balance point or whatever we want to call it between what's required and what the patient wants to do.
Yep.
All right, cool.
I think, it's a discussion, right? It's a discussion. It's a, it's a coordinated effort to get at what people, want to have happen, so that, we're making a nice, mutually acceptable decision so that everybody's happy, and, people can go with a feeling that, they accomplished something today, right?
Right. Okay, so that makes sense. The last question I have for you today is like, since a lot of these medical supply companies, medical tech companies, whatever, like Gilead and Merrick and stuff like that, are in the development of making a vaccine for the COVID. Kind of similar to that, what happened a few years ago with Ebola and obviously the Spanish flu from back in the early 1900s. So my question is, number one, when do you think a vaccine is possible? And number two, if you do think it's possible to like achieve and get it, when do you think it will become public or like available to the public?
Okay. So I think that, vaccine is possible. I think that's the greatest advancement that science has provided us in the last decade. I think we're
Right.
able to, march on and produce vaccines at a remarkable pace. The key thing is we want to be cautious about how effective the vaccine is. We want to do trials, and that's why we have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials, so that we are clear about the effectiveness of a vaccine before we start giving it to people, right? So I think there are at least 3 to 4 vaccines that are, in phase 3 trials right now. So our hope is that there'll be a vaccine pretty soon that's going to be pretty effective in most people. Problem is, we got a lot of people in the world, a lot of countries that, are clamoring for the vaccine. Even in the US, we need 300 million doses, right? At least to kind of help our people. So again, that's going to be the big issue. I think getting it out to people and making sure it's just like the flu vaccine, right? We got to get it out and get people, immunized against this virus as quickly as we can, and, proceed from there. And again, there's also, difficulties with when there's limited data or limited information. People are always scared about taking on a new vaccine, right? So that's the other part of it. So I think the hope is that once all these phase 3 trials are done and it's a proven vaccine, provides good lasting immunity, and we are definitely seeing all the normal year marks that we would want for a good vaccine, then the hope is that it'll become universally available, and, people can go ahead and get immunized against this. And hopefully after that, the pandemic will die out, and we will, continue to probably monitor this just like the flu, and then probably take every repeat vaccine every so often. I don't know.
So you're saying we're just hoping it might turn out to be like the standard flu and get the shot once in a year or twice a year, whatever it is.
Yeah, depending on the pattern in which it settles, we don't know.
So hopefully we get that pattern out soon so we can make a plan of attack for it in the future. Cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. Do you have any last words, Doctor?
So a couple of things. I think that, people are always, afraid of the unknown. And I think that the more you know about this, the better. Make sure that you're getting your information from reliable sources like your health department locally, or your health official, your public health official, or your physician. So, or your medical provider. So make sure that you're getting the information from a reputable source. Second thing is, yes, this is real. Please take it seriously, and, do the needful. It's not only to protect you, but to protect everybody else around you. Wear a mask, keep your social distance, and, wash your hands and and other exposed areas often enough so that you're not getting into trouble with the spread of this virus.
All right, cool. Dr. Satish, thank you for being on the show with us. As always, links to the description box, links to our sponsor, Bar Soap, can be found in the description box, as well as our social media links. That includes my YouTube, 2 other YouTube channels, my Instagram, Twitter, as well as the fan page here on Facebook. You can actually find the Bat's Instagram as well as the Instagram handle for Rhino and the Bat podcast. And as always, have a good one. See you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.